Welcome to another episode of Miami Cop Talk. I'm Raul. With me is my co-host, Robert Asencio. We want to thank our partners and sponsors. Share Your Heart, Miami Tactical, Mainland Marlins Podcast, and New Era Alliances. Today we have a special guest with us. Robert, you want to say a few words and introduce our special guest?
Absolutely. Welcome everyone to this new episode of Miami Cop Talk. Remember, don't forget to catch us on most podcast platforms: Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and please do not forget to subscribe. This is a brand new platform. Hopefully we will bring you all those topics that others will not address, but more importantly, issues that are important to first responders.
Give them the website. Give them the website.
Absolutely. Please visit us at www.miamicoptalk.com. How's that voice? Anyway, wow. It is my pleasure to introduce to you a public servant, a person who was at a very, very young age, joined the military. He's from Philly. We're not going to hold that against him, but he's certainly been in South Florida for a very long time, resident of Miami Springs for the last 10 years, a tenured professor at Miami-Dade College. That's kind of hard to find these days. A guy that's a historian, a friend, a personal supporter of law enforcement, Dr. Victor Vazquez. Welcome, Doctor.
Hey, thank you. Thank you both for having me on today.
We'll look forward to speaking here. Before we get going, let's call you Vic, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Vic,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely,
Victor.
absolutely.
So
my brother calls me.
That's the name Mom gave you. So more importantly, Victor, you know, you're a family man. Tell us a little bit about yourself and this new endeavor that you're embarked on, running for city council in the city of Miami Springs. In your involvement with law enforcement, given that this is Miami Cop Talk, tell us about a little bit what your engagement has been with law enforcement and what you intend to do with law enforcement upon getting elected.
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity. Full disclosure, my family's been in Miami for 40-something years, wow. Even though I moved here about less than 20 years ago. I've been a resident of Miami Springs for 10 years. Most of my volunteer time has gone to working with the American Legion Post 32, which is the veterans organization here locally. We celebrate the Memorial Day and Veterans Day events, and we're working on getting a new war memorial because the other one has been dated. And the other little bit of time I got left, I dedicate to the Boy Scouts. Troop 334 right here in Miami Springs, working with my son who just earned his Eagle Scout status. It's the highest rank you can find.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I have never run for political office before, but I've been a public servant all my life. And I felt the calling to get in there and bring some insight and renewed energy to city government. Just 2 years ago in the election, no one ran, so all the incumbents were reelected without an election. So I found that to be kind of odd. But there were some openings in city council this time around. One person left because of term limits, and another person is going to be the first woman mayor of the city. And so when I began the process of not only contacting voters and talking about the ideas I've had, I've also met with the city manager, with the chief of the police department, the chief of Department of Public Works. And as a citizen, I support the police. I think we need more police. But I've always been a little concerned. And as I talk to neighbors door to door, they're concerned because they sometimes feel that they don't see enough police presence. And so when I met with the chief, Armando Guzman, one of the things that I found out that really kind of threw me back, I didn't realize, and then I looked at some statistics over the last 3 years, is that about 40% of the calls to the Miami Springs Police Department come from the hotel area on Northwest 36th Street. Northwest 36th Street, the eastern part is, good part of it is Miami Springs. On the other side is the airport. There are about 20 hotels there. Not all of them are in Miami Springs, but most of them. And over the last few years, there have been some rising crime situations there. The one that's made the news more recently over the last year or so is some human trafficking going on there. So in addition to the general issues of drug trafficking and other things, this has been compounded now by human trafficking. And so if you put the two things together, it paints a picture of a police force, a local police force that has to respond to any calls coming from the hotels because it is Miami Spring. And if 40% of those calls are going there, that means that there's less of them in other parts of the Springs. And so it's our local police force has been kind of taxed by this. The hotels in Miami Springs do not pay the bed tax to the city. They pay that to the county. So there's something wrong here with this formula because the residents of Miami Springs, the taxpayers of Miami Springs are paying for the police, and we are happy to do so. But now a lot of attention is going to these hotels where there's some serious crimes. The Miami Springs Police Force has been working with the county police and the state attorney's office, et cetera, on some of the more egregious situations. And so I asked the chief, I said, listen, what else can we do in the city? He's okay with the budget he's got, but he can always use, a few more police officers. And so my view on this, if I get into city council, is to begin to have these conversations with the county about these tax dollars that generally go to promoting tourism. That's what those bed taxes were originally set up to do in Miami Beach. But we've got to find a way to augment the resources for our local police. And hopefully some of that augmentation will happen with the county providing some of that tax dollars back to the city to either help us cover the police for all that time they're putting into policing the hotels, or even add to it and add some additional officers, as Chief Guzman pointed out to me.
No, absolutely. And I'm sure there are a lot of creative ways, 1, 2, 3 strikes, and you got to pay for an off-duty police officer type of thing. But I know Miami Springs is a very strong supporter of law enforcement. Here's a little history. Over 20 years ago, when the FOP 133 that I'm a part of started their Fraternal Order of Police Lodge, the very first meeting was held in the City Hall chambers, because one of our officers was very, very good friends with the mayor at the time, over 20 years, and our FOP Lodge 133 was started in Miami Springs. So thank you to Miami Springs for being a strong supporter of law enforcement. And I'm sure when you get on that city commission, you're going to be a very strong advocate for law enforcement. So, here in Miami Cop Talk, we want people to know that, you are a candidate for law enforcement. And as everyone knows, some people agree, some people don't, with the broken window theory that, if you don't address the small issues, they grow. Property taxes are affected. Safety is the number one component people look at when they're moving into a community. They want safe and protected neighborhoods. And I'm very familiar with the area that you're referring to there on 36th Street. I know there's a diner there that I used to go to all the time. Tom's NFL.
Yeah.
Go there all the time.
It's still there, man. It's still there.
Yeah. So, I understand what you guys are tasked with and challenged with. I know the chief of police there in Miami Springs. He's a retired Miami police individual, was part of, he's a tough guy. He was part of I think he was a SWAT commander or whatnot in the city of Miami. So you guys have a good guy leading your police department, but without strong elected officials, the police department really has its hands tied. So let me ask you a question. Do you have, and you don't have to, give out your information, because I know the way politics works. You give your idea, you give what you have planned for once you get elected. And if you give that information before you get elected, it just whole happens. Maybe the other person on the other side may turn around and says, well, this is my idea, and going back and forth. But do you think there could be a solution to the issues that you just mentioned, that 40% of calls for service could they be addressed with the strategies that you have in mind?
I believe so wholeheartedly. I had a conversation about a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, with Maria Mitchell. Maria Mitchell is a sitting councilwoman who will be the mayor on April 12th when the inauguration takes place, because she had no opposition. But I had a conversation with her about this because she was dealing with this issue prior to the elections. And I think that, and I agree with her, we have multi-pronged approach to this. And there are two aspects to this, right? There is the financial aspect, as I mentioned, with the county and the hotels, et cetera, right? And then there's the policing issue itself, which is, and I happen to agree with the broken window theory, by the way. And I've used that as I've talked to neighbors, that a situation left unattended, promotes other situations. And so clearly the escalation of the crime on that edge of Miami Springs in the hotels has now gone from the little runway hotels, which we've closed down, which the police has closed down, into the mainstream hotels. The last case that I recall a couple of months ago of a young lady who was convinced, via online to come down to Miami, an 18-year-old, that almost got swept up in a human trafficking situation, actually happened in one of the major hotels. It was not in those little fly-by-night places. So clearly, the broken window theory applies here. It's expanding. Of course, this is not that particular kind of situation. Really involves multi-layer law enforcement and agreements amongst different forces to attack that, because that's a much bigger issue, right? And so, but some of that kind of individuals that have been moving into the hotels has also spilled into the community. And I was out there on a week ago with some neighbors who actually have an opening between their street and one of the hotels. You got all kinds of people coming in. I saw somebody playing basketball on a neighbor's basket when that wasn't, that's not a park. But he thought he could bring in a basketball and shoot some hoop while he drank his beer. What I mean by that is that it's kind of complex. Clearly, the chief knows this and the city manager on it. But, in city council, we need to be on it as well. And so I'll be working hand in hand with Maria Mitchell, the new mayor, to address both the funding issue and the policing issue as best as we can as sitting council members. And that was my commitment to Chief Guzman. And also maybe in the future, a little bit down the line, we need a bigger facility for the police department. They had to rent some space right there on Westward because their offices are on top of one another. You've been to City Hall. It's City Hall and the police department all together in a fairly small building. And they need that now. And that's a longer term plan. But you know what? If my opponent wants to support that, let him do so. I'll let this show speak for itself.
So here's a good thing to point out. We who have been in law enforcement will tell you that our biggest battles are generally with our elected officials, in that, in order to perform the job, protect citizens, accomplish the mission of public safety, it costs money, right?
Yes.
And we also know law enforcement professionals are very cognizant, because we're also constituents, we're also taxpayers. We know that, there's a balance between getting more, meeting the needs, and taxing the citizens. So we don't want to burden the taxpayers. So your complimentary statement here about seeking, the entry, a revenue stream, if you will, for a sharing of revenue stream that already is there to better protect not just the citizens, the tourists, but offset the taxation, the burden, if you will, on the citizens, is very, very rewarding. I mean, it's very refreshing, excuse me. I also believe that this idea of you coming in with an open mind and speaking down with sitting with the chief, not many elected or candidates that seem to be elected leaders do that. So I compliment you. But is there anything else you want to share with our audience that you're working on as we get
Yeah,
ready to close out this session?
Yeah, I think that the revenue stream is very important. That's one of my big items. It's on all the literature. It's on all the opportunities I've had to speak to voters. I am zeroing in on looking for ways to raise revenues. As I'm telling people, as soon as they open the door, I'm running to raise revenues, not taxes. And we have a couple of revenue streams that really need some attention. You know, those of you that have been to the downtown area know that that's our business district. Our business district has been on the decline for some years, even before COVID. And so I'd like to see us work with those small businesses. I've spoken to a couple of business owners in that area to see how we bring that back up. There is certainly space for other small businesses to move in, but the city needs to be a promoter of this. And I'm not saying they have to put money in, but we have to find the ways to bring other revenue streams into the city. Even along 36th Street, there are opportunities, as you well know, Robert, of you know, the mayor of the city of Miami and others are trying to attract high-tech businesses that make Miami a center of high-tech businesses. I'd like to look for ways to see if we can attract a piece of that, maybe related to aviation. The airport is next door. Miami Springs was founded by aviators, you know, to see if we could, along 36th Street, there is a strip that has some large parking lots and some areas that maybe we could build out and attract something like that. So my focus is going to be on raising revenues, right? And if you raise the revenues, you have the dollars to support the police department without having to ask residents to pay more taxes when they know, as I know as a resident, we have some of the highest tax rates in the county. So I am focusing on that, looking for ways to increase the revenues of the city.
Well, Raul, you want to close it out? Seeing that we've come
Excellent.
to the end. And Doctor, before we allow Raul to close it out, please, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, where can they get a hold of you?
Okay, so the easiest way to get a hold of me is calling on 786-505-0711 or www.victorvazquezhernandez.com.
Thank you, Vic, for being with us. And I'll say this, anyone running for office that's a supporter of the police is supported by Miami Cop Talk, because we are advocates for law enforcement on this show. So we appreciate your advocacy for law enforcement. Thank you again for being on the show. We want to thank our listeners. We want to thank again our sponsors, Miami Tactical, Mainland Marlins Podcast, Share Your Heart, and New Era Alliances. New Era Alliances. Thank you again. Visit our website, miamicoptalk.com, all our platforms. You want to say bye, Robert?
See you next time. Join us in Miami Cop Talk, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, Miami Cop Talk. Let me try that again. Miami Cop Talk. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
MiamiCopTalk.com. Thank you.